You're muted, Bishop.
Okay, great day, and welcome to Spirit and Mind, where we are overcoming technology issues, though we are committed to discussing current affairs with faith and mental health perspectives. I'm Guy Robinson, and so grateful to be with you today, and grateful to have Dr. Shepard with us. Dr. Shepard,
Yes, sir, Bishop. How are you?
doing well, doing well. Glad to be here. And we welcome all of our Spirit and Mind family, and certainly want to encourage you to let someone know that it is Spirit and Mind time. Let them know. And we believe we've come up with some great subject matter to cover and material prayerfully and studiously, and look forward to you being a part. So let someone know. And then Dr. Shepard, uh, let us know some of the ways that you can stay in touch and some of our venues by which you can advise your friends and family to connect with us on any venue that meets their convenience.
Yes. So, hello, everyone, again, and greetings, and good evening, and afternoon, if it's still afternoon where you are living, Pacific time zone in particular. Cynthia Hackshaw is out there, Sandra McCrae, Diane Sanders, Juanita Henderson, Stacy Bynum, and Sarita Watson. Thank you for being out there. And I hope that all of you all who are sharing right now, Laverne Jones, this particular show, this broadcast. It has been a blessing to many. It's been a blessing to both myself and Bishop as we continue to learn and share. And again, we are grateful for the responses that we receive through emails. And you can email us. You can email me at my email account, my Gmail account, I should say, which is jshep2471 at gmail.com. You can go even to my website, drjonathanshepard.com, and you can send your contact information. I just got a couple, even over the last couple of days, and I'll be responding to those persons probably early next week. And just want people to know that we are looking forward to communicating with you. And Bishop's information will be shown next, and you can communicate with him at the various methods right there on his Instagram, Facebook, all different social media outlets. And I'm sure Bishop will be glad to hear from you. You can even see him even throughout the week at the Tabernacle, where he is the pastor. He's the senior pastor, and I'm sure he'll be glad to see you over there also. So those are the ways in which you can stay connected to us. It's important to stay connected during this time. I've heard so many times where people have said that this show brings them help. It's almost for some people like a therapy show. And when I say a therapy show, I mean something that allows people to get the information and to be able to process it, to be able to release it, which is wonderful. We want also to know that we're not recommending necessarily any treatments for you because we're not entering into a patient client relationship here. This is strictly for edification, information, and for inspiration purposes. And so we want to be clear about that, but we love what we do. We're passionate about it. And so continue to reach out to us.
Absolutely, absolutely. It is all about connection. I echo that and underscore that. So we're so grateful for being connected today on Spirit in Mind, and we've been talking um, about what's influencing your appetite. That's really been our overall umbrella subject title. What is influencing your appetite? Appetite, the distinctive, instinctive desires necessary to keep up organic life, especially the desire to eat, a natural desire to satisfy a bodily need. We also have been talking about um, um, spiritual appetites and those things that hunger and thirst after righteousness, which is to be in the right place at the right time, in right position, with healthy perspectives. And so we've been talking about spiritual appetites as well. And last week we talked a little bit about anxiety and as an appetite trigger. We've talked about grief as an appetite trigger. And these things are really going to overlap in many ways. And so we'll be revisiting even some of those because there is an encyclical kind of relationship between these triggers that we're mentioning. And so we may overlap a little bit and reference some things that we discussed in previous weeks, which is okay because we're building line upon line, precept upon precept. And so today we are talking a little bit about anger as a trigger. And Dr. Shepherd is going to open us up in some of these things about what's influencing our appetite and in terms of what is anger and strong feelings of annoyance, displeasure, or hostility is how Oxford defines it. But Dr. Shepherd is going to take us from here and take us to the next segment of our discussion today.
Absolutely. And just want to add a piece on the reason why we continue to talk about what's fueling your appetite, because we understand that we're in a time of transition. And as we're in a time of transition, there has to be an appetite for what is going to carry you throughout the transition. As we're in a season of movement and we're in a season of where things have been literally shaken up in the earth, we want to make sure that we're not moving out of anger, that we're not transitioning because of anxiety, we're not transitioning because of other things that could be fueling our appetite, which could be even apathy, lack of motivation. That is even something that could actually fuel your appetite. And so we're going to deal with these things because as we transition, we want to make sure that we're healthy, period. I mean, that really right there deserves some silence because there's so many people who find themselves in the place of transition, but they're moving because of fear. They're moving because they just got to do it. And they're mad about it. They're angry. And when anger takes over, it literally can lead you into a place that could be detrimental or even destructive for you. So let's dive a little bit into this. So when we talk about anger, anger is a healthy emotion. So I want somebody to type in there, healthy emotion. It's not bad to be angry. So many people try to say to themselves, well, I'm not going to get angry. Anger is a natural emotion that was given to us. So there's nothing wrong with being angry. It's an appropriate emotion, as a matter of fact. And thank you, Diane Sanders, for saying that these segments bring clarity. So that's what we want to do even right now. We want to help bring some clarity. Again, if someone can just, anger is an appropriate emotion. It is healthy to be angry. The problem is when something is healthy and is taken out of control, or it is continued to be maintained to when it now becomes unhealthy. Let me say it like this. If you stay in a certain position or stay in a certain emotion for too long, it could cause you to be warped in your thinking. It could actually put you in a state of where you're not dealing in reality. You can be happy for too long. Yeah, some people, what do you mean? Yeah, so everything. I'm just happy about everything. I'm just happy about everything. Nothing bothers me. Nothing. Sometimes that is a person who is disillusioned. So we've been given these different emotions by God, and they are healthy to have. What I want to do now, as we pivot and talk about anger, let's look at where anger finds itself when it relates to mental health. Okay. Anger is one of those issues that you will find in different disorders, Bishop. It can be an underlying disorder for several different disorders. You can find anger in alcoholism. Alcoholism, which is a substance use disorder. You can find anger in depression. And we've talked a lot about depression during this particular broadcast and during this particular show. Yes, people who are depressed are angry. I was just sharing with someone recently how Black men, and sometimes men in general, they don't have the weeping and crying that we think about with depression or the depressed mood or the sadness, but there's an irritability. There's an increased irritability just where there any little thing you say literally sets them off, and that could be due to a mood disorder called depression. Substance use. I'll just go back just to explain a little bit how anger can be found there. When you have too much to drink, intoxicated, inebriated, you can find yourself with emotions that are out of control, and anger is one of those. Even if you're going through withdrawal, you're angry because you can't get to the substance that you desire, and you do anything in your power and you can't find it. That anger will result there. Obsessive compulsive disorder, that's the third one. People can just be angry from the frustration that happens with your inability to prevent the obsessive thoughts. Obsessive compulsive disorder. This is a person who sits and ruminates about things. That's what the obsession is about. If you are ruminating about just various things that happen, OCD, where you don't want to see something dirty, and so you just, what can I do to make sure it doesn't get dirty? Get dirty. You just keep ruminating about it until you become so angry that when you see somebody makes a mess, it just just explode with anger. Or you can even have someone interfere with your ability to carry out the ritual. That'll make you angry. ADHD, you can even see anger in, Bishop. Oppositional defiant disorder, bipolar disorder, intermittent explosive disorder, and even grief. And we talked about in the stages of grief. So there's 8 different things that you can see where anger is found. So when you say that you have an anger problem, it doesn't necessarily give us a clear definition of what is causing anger. See, one of the things, and we'll talk about this, if anger is present, there is typically a source. Very rarely is anger just there because you're just angry. And that can happen, but there's normally a source behind the anger. And why is this important? And I'm tying it back in, and I'm going to stop, let Bishop jump in. But we have to think about it because some of us are eating angry as our diet. Oh, man. We have certain things that, because we're depressed, and anger is our normal appetizer, entree, if you would. And we're angry because of the transition that we're in. People are angry now because they can't get back to the things that they want to do, even within church houses, even within their own families, and other things that they desire to do. Just angry. And what I hope to do, and what we hope to do during this time, as we're in transition, preparing for a new year, we want to reduce the anger. There is a spirit of anger that has taken over. And I don't use that word lightly. There's a spirit of anger that has overwhelmed and just came in to where people just now, when people drive, just angry. And so there's a source behind that. I just named some of the disorders where you can find anger in. And I will start right there. And then, Bishop, I'll come back and talk about some of the physical, emotional symptoms of anger.
That's a wonderful foundation, and so thankful for it, Dr. Shepherd. And it triggers one of the questions from our viewers. That sometimes you're angry and don't know why, and that's the purpose of getting help, whether it be through a psychotherapeutic encounter to discover the source of that. We'll try to uncover it, or by pastoral counsel and or spiritual revelation. That's a thing that we can very well pray for. Again, God, show me, you have searched me and known me. Show me where this is coming from. And you can do both. Pray for it, and then you can get the answer to the prayer in pastoral or psychotherapeutic counsel. that kind of confirms what you've been praying about. But there's revelation and there's empowerment in being able to find where perhaps the source or what is triggering that, and the different ways to do that. But that was a powerful question. And so I'll talk a little bit about the theology of anger, which really complements the psychology of anger that Dr. Shepherd just gave. Anger, again, is an emotion. The APA, in its Encyclopedia of Psychology, defines anger as an emotion characterized by antagonism towards someone or something that you feel has deliberately done you wrong. That's the APA's encyclopedia definition. Oxford is a strong feeling of annoyance or displeasure or hostility. I want you to notice the APA's definition is very relational. It's between self and other. But I want to reiterate that biblically, anger can be a good thing. Moreover, you can even argue, and there certainly is a theological argument that asserts that anger is a divine attribute. For the Lord is very clear when the scriptures say his anger waxed hot against Israel or against Moses, and those kinds of things. So anger can be a good thing. It gives you a way to express negative feelings, and can even be a motivator to find solutions to problems. The point is that theologically, anger, like other emotions, has a purpose. Dr. Shepherd said so well that we live in a culture where people say, I don't want to get angry about it. And they even say, I don't mean to get emotional about it. And sometimes you hear these apologetic things, apologetic disclaimers for being emotional or expressing anger or acknowledging that. There's a sociological reason for that. We've been socialized to say those kinds of things. The age of enlightenment was known for pushing being rational and suppressing being emotional. And that age of enlightenment still very much influences some of our Western ideology. And so you hear people even apologizing for being emotional when emotions are a very human thing and actually are a divine attribute. God has imitable attributes and ones that we cannot imitate. We can't imitate his perfection. We cannot imitate his omnipresence. We cannot imitate his omniscience or knowing everything. But we can imitate his emotional attributes. We can try to imitate the love of God and the compassion and even the anger, because that is a part of the divine perspectives. What is interesting theologically, though, is that though anger, if it is a divine attribute, it doesn't function as at the drop of a hat as the others. The scriptures say that he is slow to anger,
yes,
plentiful in mercy. It doesn't say that anger isn't a divine attribute. It's just that God has a kind of, God being God is able to regulate his emotions with perfection, unlike us from a theological perspective. So being made in the image of the likeness of God means that we have the capacity to be angry. Moreover, some things ought to make us angry. Injustice, it can be motivating. It can cause us to take on charity, poverty, or to irritate us. And that can be the motivator to make us do outreach as the church. Or injustices can make us angry. And that can be the motivator to begin to operate in prophetic ministry and speak truth to power and petition the powers that be for a more just society and world. So some things are meant to irritate us, just like some things irritate God. The distinction is that God, being perfect, has this ability to perfectly regulate his emotions.
right.
Whereas you and I, being flawed vessels, need the Spirit of God, whether it is through prayer, pastoring and or therapy, but we need all of that to help us regulate. Thus, the old saints used to call God, when they talked about him, they would say he's one of the things they would say all the time, Dr. Shepard, is he's a heart fixer.
Yes.
Which means my inner self. It doesn't just mean, it wasn't talking about the organ. It meant in the Old Testament, heart means my inner workings, my inner being, my thoughts, and my will, my decisions. So they would say he's a heart fixer and a mind regulator.
Mm-hmm.
and so because it's submitting to the God who made us, who is emotional, first of all, and who made us to be emotional. The difference is his emotional regulation is perfect. Ours is flawed.
Wow.
And so we need his intervention to be a heart fixer and a mind regulator. Because there's a difference. So that anger, the Bible says in Ephesians, be angry, and then I'll stop here. Be angry, but do not sin, which means don't transgress. Don't take your anger beyond a point of being healthy and holy. So transgression, going against or beyond the boundaries. So don't be angry, because some things ought to make us angry. Again, sickness, poverty, injustice in society. These things ought to provoke a kind of what theologians call a righteous indignation.
Right.
And so it ought to do that, because that can be motivational to cause us to do the work of ministry with more passion and to help others. But what the point is that don't let anger turn to hate and revenge. We sometimes use them interchangeably, but there's some considerable studies so that anger has a different focus. In biblical anger is to focus, and the focus is on to address, restore, and or change an unjust situation. That's where the focus is, because it's motivational. Hate, the focus is on trying to hurt and eliminate the intended target. And then thirdly, revenge is similar to hate, where the focus is to hurt and eliminate, but it's usually because of a deeply personal, like I'm involved. That's why the person who is vengeful usually wants to do it themselves. I want to handle this. I want to be the one to, if you will, do this or carry this out, vigilantism. And so the point is that as I close, we apologize for being emotional beings is essentially apologizing for being who we are in the image and likeness of God. The Enlightenment kind of left us. That's why the Enlightenment was followed by the Romantic period. I don't have time, but you historians and sociologists know what I'm doing. We're coming back against that Enlightenment thing. Much of our documents as a nation and all that was written during the Enlightenment period. And so there's this kind of apologetic offered for being stoic, for being emotional. And so don't want to get angry. That's not the goal. The goal is not elimination as much as it is regulation or stewardship of those emotions theologically.
Yes, so I want somebody to write. Now, I need you to hang on in here. I see people are coming on in and asking some real good questions. So I need you to hang on, because we're going to ask some of these questions. But I really need for you, Harold Harrison, Diane Sanders, I need you to go ahead and share. Others, please share, because I need you to hang on in there. Thank you, Brother Martin. He's a good guy. And so I want you all to hang on, because I need you now to type in there, stop apologizing for being emotional. Yeah, seriously. Stop apologizing for being emotional. I heard you clearly, Bishop. God created us, and this is what I wrote down. God created our emotions. Stop apologizing for being emotional. And we really have a tendency to do that. I just wanted to back that up, Bishop, with what you just said.
Yes, Dr. Shepard, could you reminded me, and I close with this. If we stop being, because the goal is not elimination, it's regulation. If we stop being emotional, we can't even fulfill our divine purpose.
Wow.
Jesus, when he was asked, what are the greatest commandments, or what is the greatest commandment? He gave some very emotional answers. Love the Lord thy God with all your heart, mind, soul, strength, depending on which one. So he said that's what it's for. Our worship is supposed to be emotional. Emotions are so that we can be relational, because emotions are directed towards another. So he says, you shall love the Lord thy God with all your heart, mind, and soul. And then he said, the second commandment is like unto the first. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. And so that's three kinds of loves right there that he just talked about. The love of God, the love of self, and the love of others. So these emotions are given to us because we're made in the image and likeness of an emotional God. Again, and Dr. Shepard, pardon the interruption. So the only distinction is God's emotional regulation is flawless.
That's right.
And ours is flawed.
That's right. That's right. So thank you, Bishop. I felt that we needed to stay there, and I'm glad I listened to the Lord, because we have to stop doing that. So many times we teach our young people, even older ones, about don't cry, don't be emotional. You just too emotional. Stop allowing people to say that to you. And parents, you stop saying it to your children. Leaders, stop saying that to the people who you oversee and supervise. There is a way to regulate. And I like what Bishop said. The goal is regulation and not elimination. So we want to make sure that we understand that the goal is regulation and not elimination. So what I'm going to do now is answer a question. This is where I was already pivoting to. Because as we regulate our emotions, we have to understand that anger will cause various symptoms within our body. It will cause various symptoms within our physical body and in our emotional beings. And so to answer the question that Harrison asked, he said, if anger is healthy, what effects will it have on one who has hypertension or high blood pressure? Well, that's the first thing regarding anger. When you look at physical symptoms, it increases your blood pressure. Absolutely. When you think about it, you can see where people have literally their countenance changes. I've seen where people become more red, whether they're black or white. It don't really matter really what color. I've seen it. You've seen it with cartoons where you see like the monitor where the face, there was white and then the red starts going up to the top. Yeah, anger increases your blood pressure. I've seen it even in my office when people are angry. We took their blood pressure before coming in, and then we took it after we've had a tough session. And guess what? The blood pressure was raised. There is something that happens within your body. And I won't just say something. I understand it's just not meant for me to get into that technical terms today, but there literally is a constricting of your blood vessels that allows for your blood pressure to rise when you get angry. And so that is what happens. So you will have increased blood pressure. You'll have increased heart rate. You'll even start feeling your heart beat faster, heart palpitations. These are physical symptoms of anger. Tingling sensations. You'll have tingling. You feel it in your limbs, in your fingers, in your toes, and other areas of your body. I don't know if you've ever felt anger. Yeah, thank you, Minister Cat. I don't know if you've ever been angry and you just kind of felt this overwhelming sense coming over your body. Come on, y'all know what I'm talking about. If you know what I'm talking about, just put it in the chat real quick in comment section. Yes, Dr. Shepard, I know what you're talking about. I have felt those symptoms. Tingling sensation, muscle tension. You can see where people literally tense up when they get angry. They may even ball up their fists, get ready to fight. Literally because they're angry. These are just some of the physical symptoms of anger. So hopefully, Harold, I answered your question for you because this is what anger looks like. Now, let's move on. Emotional. So thank you, Maddie Evans. At least someone out there was admitting, yeah, anger can turn to bitterness. Yeah. So let me know that you know what I'm talking about. Oh Lord Jesus. Stacy says she feels all of these symptoms every day at work. Lord, we're gonna pray that bound that bondage is broken because to be angry at work every day, that's not good. That's not good. That's not good. And that is something that we want to break. But I hear you though, because a lot of people are in that position. Um, so emotional symptoms. So we just talked about the physical symptoms, the emotional symptoms of anger, irritability. I talked about that earlier when I was describing some of the mood disorders that go along with anger. Irritability, frustration, anxiety, rage, stress, feeling overwhelmed, guilt. These are some of the emotional symptoms of anger. Irritability that's out of control. You can't say anything to anybody, to that person without them getting upset at that person. Frustration, things that we have been feeling over these last several months due to the pandemic, due to the various things that have occurred within our families and systems. Anxiety, which we've definitely have talked a lot about lately. Rage, stress, feeling overwhelmed, and guilt. I'll just rename them again because to hear it twice, make sure that you get that and understand it. Thank you, Minister Kat. We have got to understand that these things that we feel as anger, that is anger, will affect our physical bodies and our emotional beings. You can't be angry and say it doesn't affect you. That's a lie. I'll say it again. Anger affects you physically and emotionally. And if you say that, it's not the truth. Because some of the things and where I'm leading toward now, there are certain anger issue types. So Bishop will let me know if he wants me to go into that just yet. But I got a whole other segment where we're going to talk about anger issue types. Because when we look at the different ways in which we can handle our anger, we need to know where we fit in, because it is happening. If you're a human being, and I pray that everybody on here is a human being and not a robot, that you are going to have some emotions. And so I'm looking at some of these things. Sandra McCray is saying every day living and driving in Baltimore. I hear you. I mean, I literally was attacked on 695 Bishop in July while driving on a Sunday morning because they felt that I was driving too slow. All these lanes around me, and they picked me. And when I would not respond, Bishop, do you know this person actually slowed up so I could meet up to them face to face? I was aware of what they were doing. I said, no, let me just slow down even further, and followed me for 5 minutes. I was praying. I was like, God, you have got to intervene here because I'm not about to go out like this. And I was serious, because it is anger. People just, I'm like, all this road around me, Sunday morning, if you live in Baltimore at 695, it's not heavy traffic unless there's something that has happened. But literally, the anger had consumed this person to where they wanted me to confront them side by side. And so you have to use wisdom. Did I feel fear? Absolutely. Did my blood pressure get increased a little bit? Yeah, it wasn't anger, it was fear for me. But I'm sure with that person, it was anger. And so it was just emotion that was out of control. And I don't know what may have led this person to want to do this or feel like this. And sometimes you don't know why you get like that. And so again, let's remember the premise of what we're talking about, because God has called us in this season of transition to be prepared to move forward in the things of God. But if we're stewing in anger, oh yeah, I'm using the right word there. If we're sitting in anger, let me tell you, it's affecting you physically and emotionally. I'll stop right there.
Yeah, Dr. Shepard, that's touching on some powerful things, and that's why it's so important that we have healthy outlets. Again, the connection between mind and body is so profound. And so that adrenaline starts rushing, and the fight, flight, freeze kind of things start kicking in. And it's literally saying, do something. And just before we go into some of those characteristics of anger, there's a sociological element to this. We are socialized even, and there's been some great work done sociologically, so that it has a lot to do with socioeconomics and other kind of things. But we are socialized. Some of that may be like the road incident, may be misplaced anger, which is, I'm not really angry at you, but I'm angry at the thing I'm dealing with, and I need something to take my anger out on. You know, in first, is a biblical example is 1 Samuel 30, when David and all of his men lost their families and all of their possessions, and Ziklag was burned to the ground. And I know we like to quote that text that David encouraged himself in the Lord, but look at the context of that text. Why he needed to do that was because the men, it said first they were grieving till they had no more strength to weep. That's powerful. But then after that, that really is the grief reaction. Then after that, they spoke of stoning David. Right. David wasn't responsible. David didn't have their wives and children, and he didn't burn their property. He had losses too. But David was there and accessible. So he became the object of their anger. But the anger was really an expression of grief, because they first wept till they had no more power to weep. And that biblical wisdom is still very true, because I said that to say, in our society, particularly, there's still an engendering with anger too, that the only really publicly acceptable way to grieve is anger, where there's a machismo attached to it, so that even when we're hurting, there's a certain way you do that. And sociological studies have shown that, and we even have people who speak of that, and some politicians who have said, oh, strength is never crying, never apologizing, never saying I'm sorry, always being angry. If you want something to happen, you got to go and take it. That kind of language we've heard from even presidential podiums. And so that kind of thing is saying, be angry. And there's this pervasiveness of anger as an acceptable emotion in our society, even if it's misplaced. So now, even when you feel cut off in traffic, we feel that that's license to follow somebody, or to hit a flight attendant and break her nose because she asked you to keep your mask on. It just becomes justified. And that's where it becomes prophetic, that there's been this spirit where uncontrolled, unregulated anger has been out there. And that's the difference. The difference even with David. They spoke of stoning them. I'm going to stop here, but come on, this is David. David is not incapable of acting on his anger. David is a giant slayer by this time. David has so much blood on his hands, he can't even build the Lord's temple. So the point is, it's not that David can't fight and let all his anger out, but he chooses to put on the garment of prayer and praise and encourage himself in the Lord as an alternative to acting on his anger in an unregulated way. I say that to say that we all get those moments when we feel the adrenaline running through our body and telling us we got to do something. That is human. The question is, what are we going to do with it? And can we find a healthy way to do that? It'll be good not for our spirits, good for our blood pressure, as you're hearing, and all those things. So what's the healthy way to do this?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Bishop. And thank you, Martin, for joining in, and just your comment about being this. That was a wonderful point, Bishop, that you shared. about displacement and how we may be the subject when we're not the source
Yeah.
of the anger. Absolutely, absolutely. Some people just get the brunt of it. I've been talking about this lately, actually. Understanding why you are the object of the anger when you're not really even the source of the anger.
Yeah.
That's very important.
Yeah, that's the
Understand.
whole biblical principle of the scapegoat. The
Mhm.
whole biblical principle is really based off of the psychological need to objectify our internal frustrations.
Mhm.
So the chastisement of our peace was upon him. That whole idea of we need somewhere to objectify our issues. And the scapegoat comes from that sacrificial animal upon whom all of the issues were laid.
Mm.
And then that sacrificial animal began to take on the physical brunt of everybody's internal issues.
Mm.
And that's where the whole concept of the scapegoat is. And
Mhm.
that still is a part of human nature. When who knows what kind of bad day that person had, but then when they saw you on the highway, decided to objectify it and put all of that on that.
Right.
And so you're taking on stuff, and stuff is being projected onto us that really had nothing to do with us.
Nothing to do with you.
And so it's just that's why we're having this conversation so that we can go through these things, and because awareness is so very key to making healthy choices.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so thank you for Brother Meeks for joining us down there in Memphis. And he agrees that this conversation is so needed. And yes, I agree with you, Diane, that David chose not to return the anger. And so I challenge you this week with you are faced with that challenge of returning the anger that you do as David did. And again, there are some, as Bishop already said, and I've stated it too, there are some times when we need to be angry. The Bible does tell us that there is nothing wrong with it. I don't want you to think we're being contradictory here, but we want to make sure that that the anger is placed in the right way and is placed at the right feet of where the anger should be placed, if that makes sense. What I want to talk about as we progress here, and please stay tuned. Oh, we're wonderful. I mean, we're doing great. We're doing great. Loving the comments and people. Yes, that's right. You're in Indiana. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, Brother Martin. So thank you for letting Ella Lawrence Martin. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. So I want to move this conversation along. This is so needed, so needed. I want to talk about the different anger issue types. So this is where we find ourselves. And if you're open and honest, and I love the transparency that's occurring within today's discussion, you might even want to say, hey, I find myself in the outward, inward, or passive type. I just gave some brief overview here to help trigger different things in my mind as I go through them. But anger manifests itself in so many different ways, and not all anger is expressed the same way. It can be expressed in outward, inward, or a passive way or style. Outward, which is what many of us think about when we think about anger. It is where we express our anger and aggression in an obvious way. It might include shouting, cursing, Lord Jesus, throwing or breaking things, or being verbally or physically abusive towards others. That is an outward way of expressing anger. Then there's an inward way of expressing anger. And this is the anger that is directed at yourself. And I want you to hear me clearly at this because I find so many people struggle with this, where they're angry at themselves. You ever heard that phrase before? Angry at myself. It involves negative self-talk. Yeah, negative self-talk. Denying yourself, hear me on this, denying yourself of things that make you happy. Wow. Yeah, denying yourself of things that make that right there, Bishop, hits me. Because I find so many people have that inward struggle with anger, and they don't think they deserve to be happy. Wow. Self-harm even, where people may be mutilating their bodies, using different objects to cut on their arms or legs or different limbs of their body. Isolating yourself from different people. That's a way of how the anger is directed inward. So again, there's an outward,
Right.
and there's an inward. And I'll tell you, both of them are lethal. But it's that inward one that I find myself focusing on, because I see so many people struggle with that inward. They're angry at themselves for something that they really didn't have control over. They were dealt circumstances that maybe they knew better, and they just didn't know how to be able to handle it. Yeah. And then here's the last one. And Lord Jesus, you got to help me with people who deal with this last one. Passive. These are the ones who have subtle and indirect ways to express his or her anger. Examples of passive aggressiveness or passive anger behavior includes giving someone the silent treatment. Someone you angry at them, they don't even know, but you just stop talking to them, or somebody just stopped talking to you. They angry. You ever had anybody like that? Y'all were cool last week, you're just talking up a storm, and you go say hello to them, and they look at you as if you just spoke a foreign language, giving you the silent treatment, and they're angry at you about something that even had nothing to do with you. That's why, Bishop, I love what we were talking about earlier about knowing the source of the anger. People who can sulking, being sarcastic, and even making snide remarks. That's that whole passive style of anger behavior. And I did challenge you. And again, I say it with a little bit of a smile on my face, but you might want to put in the comment, Dr. Shepherd, I know what you're talking about. I know what you're talking about, because I find myself there. And again, we all have found ourselves here because it's real. And if we don't know how to deal with this anger, it will end up spoiling some victories that we were meant to have. We could even come out victoriously, but it might not even be at the full capacity that God has for us, because we've allowed stuff to be. Listen to this. I don't want to be done here. There's some things that God may have for you. There's some things that you may have earned. There's some things that you may have fought for. There's some things that you have known, God, I've been seeking for. Or there's been some things that you've been preparing yourself for, but you don't even believe that you are able or worthy to receive it. My God. Now, I'm not talking about those things where that it was nothing but the grace of God that kept you alive and saved you. I hear you on that point. I'm not driving down that lane. I'm coming down to the lane where there are people who truly believe that happiness should not be a part of their portion. And they're angry about it. They're angry about because of the abuse that they suffered. And I'm careful about what I say here, but I'm being led to say some things right now. You're angry about how your parents treated you. You're angry about the relationship that they had, and now you feel like you have broken relationships with your own parents. You're angry about the mistreatment of teachers. You're angry about how they passed you up for, quote unquote, the position, the promotion that you deserve because you've been working there for all these years. You're angry, and you let that bottle up, and now it's manifesting in your physical condition, in your emotional well-being. It's that inward peace. And what I want to tell you all today is that if we're going to move through this season of transition, my God, I was hearing Bishop Jakes, Bishop Robinson's talk about this, that while we're in this spirit of transition, if we don't know how to be able to deal with our past and let go of this anger from our past, there are some things that we may not be able to fully experience as we move through the season of transition, because it's still hangups for us. It's still baggage. It's still weighing us down. And so we don't want that to be. We don't want that to be the passive type where you got to say little snide remarks about just jealousy. She didn't really deserve it. I don't know what he did to deserve it. So, that is what we have to be careful of. These are these different anger types. Bishop, I'm going to start right there.
That's so very good and so very helpful. And it's so very important, again, just trying to raise awareness. And those anger types are very much connected to how we relate to others. And that's why I'm going, again, these emotions are for relations. They are meant for us to love God and love each other. meant for us to relate and attach to each other. And we differences, again, God does it perfectly. We form these attachment styles, which we don't have time to get into right now, but that has a lot to do in some ways of thinking and in attachment theories with how our relationships work. Another way to put it is fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. When we in our relationships in those moments, again, the fight moment, as Dr. Shepherd said, is sometimes external and internal. In pastoral counseling, we call it, some people blow up, other people clam up. But both of them are sometimes fighting. That whole silent treatment can really affect relationships, leaves the other room for the person to speculate and project and wonder. And so that can really be a form of a will to power or an effort to control. So that's the fight. Some people take flight. That's avoidance. They either disappear physically, go to the store and never come back, or hang up, never call you back. Always find reasons to break those appointments to meet. Try not to ever run into each other again. That's flight. Freezing is the numbness, just kind of indecisive. And again, these are very natural things. The fawning is concerning to me because that's the person who accepts their situation as a kind of learned helplessness, and they become pleasers at the expense of their personal well-being. You just stay in that relationship that is on some level abusive, as in the abnormal use of purpose and or people. And so you just kind of stay in it and begin to, almost like a Stockholm syndrome kind of thing, you just kind of begin to please and act as if everything is fine when really it is not. So these fight, flight, freeze, or fawn kind of styles are sort of what we do. And yet to be aware of it is an opportunity to begin to make different choices and even to get help with that in empowering ways, because these things are not overcome, not inconquerable. They're, if you will, spiritually and therapeutically treatable, if you will. And so, but you have to be aware of them so that we can make those kind of choices. And again, that's why we talk, because as Lavertus Meeks just said, some of our society's worst conditions are rooted in anger, being misplaced and not properly dealt with. That is so very true. We take stuff out on each other in ways that had stuff to do with, as Dr. Shepherd just alluded to, upbringing, untreated past trauma, traumatic experiences, sibling rivalries, and these things can affect our appetite.
Oh, yes.
Not just physically, but even spiritually. It affects what we have cravings for, trying to fill those attitudinal and emotional pain places and trying to self-medicate.
Wow.
If you will. And so that's why it's so important. And we may not get into all of that, but we did talk a little bit about that anger can influence our appetite. So there's some studies about that. I was doing a little research that anger can either, depending on whether it's short-term or persistent stress, it can either suppress our appetite when you're in adrenaline mode. You're not really thinking about what's for dinner because you got to get away from this bear that's chasing you in the woods, or out of this firefight on the battlefield. But there are other things, when it's more persistent, it tends to make us eat more. And so so these kind of things are important, because what you're eating, what we're eating physically, but most of all, for my part, spiritually, can be a direct influence of where we are emotionally. Dr. Shepherd, I'm just going to leave that there. I know we're running out of time, but
Yeah, 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 yeah. You know, and I think that was so important, Bishop. So thank you for reminding us, because when you're angry, you're going to continue to look for ways to feed that anger. And so what we want to do today is help you to identify the anger, help you to identify some of the things that would make you more aware, which is why, you know, I agree with you, Elder Martin, because let me tell you, when you are when you're feeding in that anger, that's all it's going to do. You're going to find yourself wanting more of it, and we want to cut that off. We don't want your diet to be full of anger and anxiety during this time. We don't want that to be the case. And so, if you find yourself being angry often, you find that your anger seems to be out of control, if your anger is hurting others or impacting your relationships, if it's causing you to say or do things that you regret, or if you're even physically or verbally abusive, that's when you know that you have some anger issues. That's when you know that the anger now is fueling your appetite. And yes, you could even be saved and angry. And watch, oh, Jesus, Lord, that hit me. You can see people who are angry as they operate even in God. And it's almost as if they're walking in hurt because of what has happened to them. And that's a dangerous place to be. It's a dangerous place to be, because when you've been hurt, when you're angry, you don't see straight. You don't interpret. You don't analyze things in the correct way. And so that's why we have to talk about this. I'm sure we'll deal some more with this. We'll talk about some ways in which we can reduce the anger, and we've injected that even some today. And so I just pray that this particular session today has been so helpful for you. I want you this week, I'm going to end here, to find ways that when you find yourself becoming angry at things that you know that, I shouldn't be that angry about, find yourself saying, God, help me so I can challenge myself to handle it in a different way, so that anger is not part of my diet for my appetite. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And to pray that simple prayer. God, help me that anger is not a part of the appetite or part of the diet of my appetite as I walk through this day. I'm going to stop right there, Bishop.
That's really where we'll stop, and we'll pick up next week, because I'll drop this and then we'll go. But our prayer for myself and for all of us is that we have this awareness, because again, only God operates with perfect emotional regulation. We need His intervention and guidance. That's why 1 Thessalonians 5:23 says, "Spirit, soul, body preserved," because things of the spirit must have control over my emotional state. He's my regulator, if you will. When my heart is overwhelmed, lead me to the rock. Be my mind regulator, because the trick of the enemy, and I'll stop here, is to get us in a place of exaggerated emotions. And when our emotions are exaggerated, we make unhealthy decisions. And I'm going to stop with this, but this is, I believe it's somewhere in Genesis 25, and you Bible scholars can read this with me, but I'm closing on this. When Jacob came in, when Esau came in from the field, and he looked and he smelled the stew, and he said to Jacob, "I'm hungry, give me some food." And Jacob said, "Sell me your birthright." Here's the exaggerated emotion. I believe it's somewhere around verse 32. Esau said, "Look, I'm so hungry, I'm about to die. So this birthright means nothing to me." Exaggerated emotion, poor decision. You're not about to die, but exaggerated emotion minimized his birthright. Don't let exaggerated and unregulated emotional states cost you your birthright, your purpose, your destiny. And it wasn't until afterwards that he said, "I really, my language was a bit exaggerated, superfluous. I wasn't about to die, but that's how I felt in the moment." So you gotta don't let unregulated emotions manipulate our appetite to the point that we sell our birthright.
All right, Bishop.
That's why we're here today. That's all I got, and we'll continue. Thank you for joining us. I know we're over time, but Dr. Shepherd, any conclusions?
No, we'll see you back next week. Remember this prayer, and we coming for y'all. Come on, we want to do better for this year.
Yeah, you ain't gonna die. You will live and declare the works of the Lord. Don't let that emotional exaggeration cause you to sell your purpose and destiny. The promises of God are still yea and amen. Don't despise your birthright. See you next time on Spirit and Mind.